Does it get cut? Welcome back to Smart Nonsense. This is episode 4949. We are one away. I'm Henry. That's Dylan. On Smart Nonsense, we talk about, can you stop laughing at me? We talk about entrepreneurship, self-development, and challenging norms. Today, we are talking about the great, the late Viktor Frankl and his book, Man's Search for Meaning. We are two men searching for our meaning. Holy cow. Dylan, I need some help. It's been a terrible day. I've not read this book in like 12 years, maybe. And
I swear.
I took some notes, but I'm hoping you read it today. I'm really hoping you read it today.
Some people take the podcast seriously. Luckily, that means at least one of the two hosts of the podcast.
What have you been doing today? What if this wasn't the most nonsensical day? It was a Monday that went so poorly. I think I lost the entire week. I texted you telling you the year's over. I mean,
you were sending me a lot of inspirational videos, like how to keep pushing when you feel like giving up. And I'm like, Belky, should I be worried?
It's not that I want to give up. It's just the week got off to a terrible start. And so I'm reassessing everything.
Do you want to have a little vent session or what?
Not really. I just want to know what you've been up to today.
Bottle it up. No, I played tennis, had a good time, won some, lost some, started reading the book, took a nap, finished reading the book. Now we're here.
This another, unless the edition has changed since I've cracked it open, but this is another pocketbook gem, is it not? What is it, 120 pages?
Yeah, it was only like 4 hours or something of audiobook, so whatever that translates to. But it's one of those gems that everyone's read because it's sold millions upon millions. It might be over 10 million copies at this point. I don't know how many, but it's a lot, and for a good reason. Because it's a perspective that few tell. I know I've heard of Elie Wiesel in the past, Diary of Anne Frank. This is one of those that's right up there in terms of importance and life-changing power.
So who should care?
That's a great question, Belky. Look, you get the format. You understand. Who should care? It took us a while to get to it. I think, honestly, the reason why it sold to so many people is because everyone should care. Everyone's always had this existential question of, what's the purpose of life? Why are we here? And what I like too is, I guess we're going to be giving a little bit away, but Viktor Frankl's like, hey, that's too broad of a question. No one's ever going to be able to answer that. What you should answer and what you can answer is, what is the meaning of my life? And that
today,
that way,
today,
like micro life, see what you can chip away at. Because the worst thing in the world is when you get into this rut of just boredom and lack of purpose. And it's a lot about what we talk about. So that's why we loved it. Belky, I don't know, you got to do some sort of recap of it so you semi know what happened?
Yep, Spark Notes, baby. Spark Notes, Spark Notes didn't get me through high school. I read everything. But I want to bring up high school because I remember, I don't know what we were reading, but we were in our English class and we basically came to the conclusion that, maybe it was excerpts of this, honestly. We came to the conclusion that life is suffering. It is. It's like you wake up and we equated it to the myth of Sisyphus, right? It's Sisyphus was cast to rolling a boulder up a mountain for all of eternity. I forget why. He must have done something really bad. But every time he gets to the top of the mountain, which we equated to like every time you get to bed at night, that boulder's rolling all the way back down to start over the next day. And that's just life. Obviously, Viktor Frankl has a circumstance that takes that to a whole new level. But
who's the Black Panther actor that recently passed away?
Chadwick Boseman. Yeah,
I texted you this, and it made me realize, like, everyone, that you're in that struggle every day. Like, everyone has some sort of sacrifice, hardship that they're going through. But you better find a way to at least mentally enjoy it. Because who knows, like maybe you go through all this hardship, you get to the top, supposedly, but then, a year later, you find yourself with cancer and
right. And we've talked about that too. It's like, what are you saving for? What are you waiting for? That was largely kind of translated to me. We talked about on Kilimanjaro. Like I was taking the ashes of a good friend, a neighbor up the mountain. He died of the same thing as Chadwick Boseman at 45. And if you're saving and you're saving for this retirement or this thing to happen, this travel, these plans when you're 65, 70, who's to say anything doesn't happen to you when you're 48, 49? So you texted me too when that news passed, like, wow, I remember you saying, like, you just got to love the process. You have to love what you're doing now, today, small scale stuff, because the future is not guaranteed by any means.
I think that's the essence too of why it's baffling to people. Why say I won't be depressed or something like that? Like, people have all these. I don't know. If you have meaning, you have purpose, and it's like right now, this is my purpose for the most part. Like I just love this stuff every single day. There's no reason to be upset. Mm-hmm. Like I'm excited about this.
Yeah.
Stuff. So let's recap real quick what exactly the story is about. Like the first half of the book, at least, is telling Viktor Frankl's story as his experiences. I think he spent 3 years in a not internment camp. What do you call the I guess like labor camps. What do you call the
concentration camp?
Concentration camp. I couldn't think of the word. Yeah. So 3 years, both in Dachau and was it Auschwitz? I forget.
Maybe. Or there's one that starts with a B. This is terrible. I should know.
Yeah, he was transferred a little bit, but regardless, he was taken with his family at the time. I think his wife was 23. He was in his 20s as well. His wife, his mom, his dad, and his brother, I believe, they're all taken, and they got in the cattle cars sent to Belkey. Will at some point verify which one first, but whatever.
I was doing that. It's Auschwitz.
It looked
for a while.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought.
You read it today.
There's a lot in the book, all right? Can't memorize every detail.
Yeah.
So he gets there and
wait, that's a really good point, by the way, because you ask me, you're like, why do you listen to things so fast? And I tell you, like, well, I'm not going to get every single detail, but I get the large concepts that they keep. There was someone who only reads the intro, like the first chapter or two, and then the last one, following like 80-20. You can read 20% of the book and take away 80% of the outcome or output. But yeah,
that gets depressing.
Yeah, I don't like. Okay, I want to make the point that I think it's more important that you understand Viktor Frankl's point than what year he was in which concentration camp. Like your brain doesn't have the space for that kind of thought.
That's for Jeopardy, and you're never going to be on Jeopardy,
right.
Most likely. So he gets there with his family, and immediately when you're coming in off the cattle cars, there's one person standing. One Nazi, I forget what they call them in this case, but they basically separate like left or right. And left means you're going straight to the baths, which means gas chambers. And then right means you're going to the labor camp, essentially, because you have to be healthy enough. And so 90%, I think he says the number, goes to the left immediately. So his entire family just sent to the left, except him. And I think because he knew like this was important, he kind of got his stature up and just looked healthy, and that got him in, at least saved him in the first case. And it happens repeatedly. We'll get into it, but so many of these little fate scenarios where it's just like luck of the draw that he made it because so few did. And he says, and I like this and respect it, where he says that the best didn't make it out of these concentration camps because the only way that you can survive is by cutting a little edge, like getting a little bit extra bread, stealing it from someone, or like, you don't volunteer for the hard work or whatever, or you've like find your way by luck. It's just like the best of the best don't make it through. That was one of the little nugget takeaways.
Wait,
there.
The best of the best make it through?
Don't make it through.
Don't make it through.
Like only the people that are willing to cut corners, be a little bit evil in the sense of like pushing someone else under the bus to save themselves.
Ooh.
Will make it.
But that goes against what he says later on about kind of servitude, and like the ultimate being is serving somebody else, being so selfless. He said the more one forgets himself, the more human he is and the more he actualizes himself. But it sounds like, and again, I didn't read the book today, but It sounds like what you took away was you actually have to burn little bridges to get an edge.
Well, I mean, it's not like that's not a big takeaway for me. It's more so admitting like there are other stories of important people and not to put them on a pedestal as doing something heroic. There are probably other lessons to take away from that, but yeah. So he gets there and immediately, it's crazy. Like the conditions that they're going through is just horrendous. They get like one piece of bread a day and soup with no peas most of the time. It's just broth and barely anything at that. So it's literally your body is just eating itself until you die. And he had the luck of being a doctor, so they treated him a little bit better than most because they're like, oh, doctor, he can help with some of the sick people, especially when, say, the staff, I don't want to call them the staff, but like whoever was in charge of the concentration camps would get sick. So he was treated a little bit better in that sense. But it was just brutal day in and day out. And this is in Poland, I believe. Yeah, Poland, right? So it was just frigid weather for, at least half of the year. And they don't have shoes. Like if they had nice shoes, they'd have to give them to the guards. And they'd get beaten if they were trying to keep their own shoes and like cut pieces off so it looked like they're crappy and the guards didn't want them. All these little stories of just like you try and cut corners there and you'll get reprimanded. So it's just the hardest conditions you can ever imagine.
And then what comes out of that is his three sources of meaning, right? What? How was he liberated ultimately when the U.S. came in?
Well, it's crazy. Like there's so many little instances of him just like somehow picking the right path. Yeah. That, like, for example, he went from, I guess, Auschwitz to Dachau. I believe Dachau was the second one. And I might be getting this wrong, but the second one, I guess, is if it's Dachau, they didn't have chimneys. So everyone was excited when they moved camps. And I think they were moving camps because the Allies were coming in on them. So they had to keep moving. But they go to this one without chimneys. They're all happy, etc. They spend some time there. And then the Allies are getting closer, like the front's getting near. So everyone has to leave. And they're putting people, not in trains now, they're putting them in trucks, I believe. And they're like, Viktor has to get on this truck to leave. But for some reason, like his guard just didn't let him go. And so he had to wait for the next truck. And it took a really long time. And it never ended up coming. So what ended up happening was like the Red Cross came, and then the Allies after that. And so they saved them. They liberated them. And what he later found out is that those trucks went to another camp. And then inside the camp, they locked all the prisoners in and set it ablaze. So he would have burned to death,
that's crazy to me.
Absurd.
That's crazy to me. And like, oh my gosh, I feel like stuff like that, not to compare my life at all, but I feel like things happen on like such micro scales like that, where I'm like, oh wow, if I didn't, it's the butterfly effect, right? If I didn't, step out of my bed with my right foot this morning, like the whole day would have been completely different. It just really puts things in perspective. Obviously, Viktor Frankl to a whole new level, but makes you wonder about all those little things that are happening. One of my, kind of in that vein, one of the biggest takeaways that I still remember from the book, like one of the only things I remember from the book, is basically like you get to decide how you react to things. And this is kind of an emotional intelligence thing, but like the one thing you can control, the only thing nobody can take away from you, in this case, like no man, no Gestapo, no Nazi, whatever can take away from you, is how you react to stimuli. And I was texting you this morning because I was at Menards with my dad, and it was just interesting to me because his reaction, like things were not going well at Menards by any means. And here we are comparing Menards to Auschwitz. But it was blatantly clear for me that like you get to decide how you react. You as a person get to decide how you react to things going poorly. Everything was going wrong. And he was just, running around the place, trying to find somebody in charge. Like, and I'm like, patient. Like, you know what I'm trying to say? You get to decide how you react to things. And I think that sets a lot of people apart.
That's why I still love the Jocko Willink sort of like the, what is it? Extreme ownership sort of mentality. And when he's always his literally my favorite video on YouTube is his good video of just, oh, bad circumstance, like you're put in a prison camp. Good. Time to test your mental fortitude. Like your family dies. It's like, good. Now you live for a meaning, for a purpose, to make sure it didn't go to waste. Yeah.
Who the heck is Jocko? A lot of people listen to him.
He was, I think it was SEAL Team 6, I want to say, or one of the SEAL teams, whatever. He was like the commander, and he trained a lot of the SEAL teams. He was, heralded as one of the best leaders. So now he teaches leadership to people in businesses, etc. But it's his spin. You can always say good to anything and then positively reframe it. And that's basically what Viktor was doing. And he talks about logotherapy at the end, which is based off of Logos, I guess is how you say it. Logos.
Yeah, Logos.
And how it's...
Wait, that's kind of like your improv. That's kind of like your improv, right? Jocko, is that his name, Jocko? He's saying basically something's happening, some stimuli, good and in improv, you're trained to say yes and, right? There is no that's refusal funny. Of something happening to you in an improv skit or in an improvised scene, like whatever. The golden rule is yes and, like, you are going to act on what someone throws your way. That's kind of a cool parallel.
Yeah, and that's what he said. Like when he was, because he is a doctor, I guess he's he's this therapist by the end of it, and he has someone come in and is like tormented that his wife died, and he's like, well, how would your wife feel if you were the one that died? And he's like, terrible. I'm sure she would be grieving excessively. Her life would be horrible. It's like, wow, you just saved her from that life of grief by you suffering. And so he's
Whoa.
You can spin anything, really, and it generally makes sense. I actually heard somewhere else too. I don't remember where I heard it, which is annoying, but it was kind of on the same vein, but a little bit more ambivalent, or like lack of emotion. It's like someone broke their leg, and they're like, oh, that's so bad that you broke your leg. And he's like, maybe not. And then the next day there's war, but they can't draft him because he has a broken leg, so he can't serve. And so they're like, oh, that's great that you broke your leg because you didn't have to go to war. And he's like, maybe not. And then the war, like, he's on the losing side because they didn't have enough men to fight the war. And then it's like, well, that's terrible that you couldn't fight because we need more soldiers. And now, the worst cause won. And like, it's just perpetually, the worst cause wins, but then that fuels an uprising and a better rejuvenation comes. So you never know whether it's going to be good or bad in the end.
That's so intense.
Your interpretation. I wish I knew the attribution.
Yeah, everything's just maybe.
Yeah, it's literally maybe.
It is what and I tell myself this a lot. I'm just like, it is what it is. Like this morning was a terrible morning. And by lunch, I'm like, you know what? It is what it is. And like the days goes on and you have to just kind of roll with the punches and pivot.
One of the comments I saw, because after I read, I kind of took my own notes and then wanted to see what other people took from the book. And someone said, whenever they see, say, a sunrise or something like that, they imagine that everyone in these concentration camps saw the same sunrise or sunset. And it's so much better. Whatever condition you're in now, I'm sure it's better than whatever they were seeing in that exact same moment. So like, you're seeing the same sight, but your condition is so much better. Why aren't you appreciating everything there? It gets deep, man. Wow. This book is... I want to reread it. I wish I had time to... usually I like to double read books, but...
Yeah, this is my plan now, is to get all my books have been sitting in boxes. This is why I didn't reread it for this. Because my books have been sitting in boxes underneath my bed. Again, like, look at the magnitude of my problems. They're meaningless. These things are meaningless. Like, I can't get a book out from under my bed.
It's actually a fun exercise to try and spin things as good. If you say good for everything. Good, I couldn't get them out of a book or out of whatever, the box. I'll appreciate them more. I'll think about them more when I do read them. Or like, you can take it in every direction. So I think that was one big takeaway. Like you said, basically, if all freedoms are taken away from you, literally food, water, shelter for the most part, your family, everything's taken away. You still have your own interpretation of what's happening to you. Like no one can take away.
I think he calls it your spiritual freedom.
There you go.
Yeah.
And that's powerful. I think, that's,
I wonder that might actually, this could be tough, but what about solitary confinement? That might be the one place where your spiritual freedom can absolutely be sapped away from you.
Why?
Because you're so intensely alone. Like,
well, here's what's interesting is how he describes how people interpret this, right? Because some people, they don't see it as a mental test. They see this as terrible. They just think of the past. They're like, my situation's so bad right now. And they're just dreaming of the life that was. And so they're constantly fixated on that. And they're just, not appreciating at least the few good things that there are to appreciate in the world. And they live in this like non-reality. And they're the ones that struggle the most. They're the ones that crack and break down. And what's fascinating too is you find that people, their survival is often mental. Like your physical survival is mental, because they talk about this one prisoner that had this dream that a genie came and was like, oh, what is your wish? And his wish was to find the day that he will get out. And that's one of the big problems, is like no one knew. It was indefinite. And that's what's brutal, is like this could be years, it could be forever. Like you don't know when you're going to get out, whereas normal sentences you do. So he asked, like, what's the date? And the genie's like, it's going to be March 30th. And so now in his head, when he wakes up from the dream, he's like, March 30th, that's when we're liberated. And he's looking forward to it every single day. March 28th, March 29th, March 30th gets there, but there's no liberation. It's the same day. And so the very next day, when he realizes he's not being liberated, he dies. He gets sick and dies because his immune system, he's given up emotionally.
This was real?
This is real. This was one of Frankl's friends.
One of the, wow.
Because, mentally he gave up. His immune system just shuts down, and then he's susceptible to disease.
I think that's
physically.
That too is, okay, two things that I see are parallel to that. One, relationships being the best indicator of health after the age of, in the second half of your life. I think it's that same kind of thing. It's like hope. It's like love for one another. I feel like so many people die alone of despair. And it'd be interesting to do a study on divorced people of age and then people in married, loving relationships, and see like how that affects health. But that's a completely different matter. The other thing, and here we are again taking something really kind of deep, and I think it applies to kind of how we trek. And I was just out trekking with Athena the other week, and so much of my mindset when I'm trekking, because we don't know how far we have to go. Like we did this in Peru. It was brutal. It was absolute suffering.
The summit day, even though we could kind of see it, Kilimanjaro I'm referencing.
Yeah.
It was hours upon hours, and we never really knew how long it took.
Right, sheer suffering. And what got me through it, at least, and what gets me through trekking, is setting micro goals. Like, camp might be just around that curve up ahead, or just down that slope up ahead. And then you get there, you at least have the wherewithal to get to that point. And then no, we don't drop dead there, but then you have to set the next micro goal. It was just really quick. I was out with Athena, and we were doing a long day, a dozen miles or so. And about 3/4 of the way, this was like her first trekking trip, and, carrying a heavy backpack. About 3/4 of the way, she was like, you know what, just leave me. This is it. I'll camp here. Just leave me here. And I knew from trekking, like, if we just keep walking, we just keep one step in front of the other, we'll hit that camp. And it was amazing how quickly her mood shifted when, we were 10 paces away from that camp. It's like, then you know that it's there. Okay, fine. But when you don't,
right.
The unknown is, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect. And I guess we'll circle back at some point to that if you're in solitary confinement. But I actually watched David Blaine, because he's on YouTube. He's about to do this ascension challenge of like flying up in balloons or whatever. But it's talking about, because he has all these like buried alive scenarios and standing in ice for 3 days straight, holding his breath for 17 minutes. How does he do that? And he breaks it down. All he does is, he sees the goal, say it's 17 minutes, he breaks into half increment, then the next half increment, then the next half. And so I've been doing that with my workouts is like, I'll do a plank for a minute. I'm just like 30 seconds, then 45, then, what is that?
15, that's an infinite series. You'll never get there.
I'll never get there, but it approaches. So
yeah,
I think that's a good way to look at it. But again, no one knew when they were getting out. It took 3 years for Frankl, but it could have very well been forever. So coming to someone in solitary confinement, that's who knows. If you know the date you're going to be out, I think there's more purpose there. Like you're like, all right, once I get out, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. You're kind of working towards that. Who knows what that?
I don't know. Happen. That's a tough one. I'm probably thinking about it for the rest of the day.
Try not to get in that situation.
I feel like Frankl, at the least was around other people. He was doing things during the day, either, practicing medicine or doing labor. Solitary confinement could be a whole nother monster in terms of spiritual freedom.
One thing that says, well, basically there are a couple factors that kept Frankl going through. One was love. And you mentioned that, like having someone you love. He cared about his wife. He was like, all he did was just think about his wife, how amazing she is, what it'd be like getting out. Even if she was dead or alive, it didn't matter. Like it was just the idea of their love together kept him going. But also humor. And he says this is like making light of the situation. It really it's just so powerful. And that was kind of one of my problems with everything liberal, because you can never joke about anything. And granted, like there are certain things you got to, be careful per se. But if you can't joke about it, and they're joking about the worst circumstances you could ever imagine, if they have a sense of humor there, it's silly that we can't at least poke fun at, but also it's bringing recognition to like the actual problem itself. I think it's silly. Like if they're joking about it, we should be able to have a better sense of humor. And that's what pushed me away. It's like, this life is so depressing when everything is so serious.
Wait, what life is so depressing?
The constant like, oh, why are you, being mean to these people? Why are you making fun of them? It's just, you can't win.
Certainly to some degree, right? I mean, life's too short to be upset about everything. I've carried that with me for a long time. It's just like, people sometimes ask, like, why don't you care more about this thing? And I'm like, it's just, life's too short. I don't want to, it's negative, Now I'm going to think, like, what would Viktor Frankl think? Huh. That's interesting. My last kind of takeaway from the book, and then I want to hear yours, is this, and it relates to something Naval Ravikant says all the time, kind of. But Viktor Frankl said, happiness cannot be pursued. It must ensue. ENSUE. And basically you can't, and this is kind of the road trip we're on now, is you can't chase after happiness or what you think happiness is. It has to happen as a product of something else. And once you've found the reason for that happiness, it becomes automatic. And the big thing Naval says, and kind of how this relates to spiritual freedom, is he always says, peace is happiness at rest, and happiness is peace in motion. Right? So peace is kind of happiness not moving. You're at this sense of peace with yourself and with the world. But then happiness is that peace moving inside of you, if that makes, and it took me a long time to understand, but I think that's really good.
So both are forms of happiness. Is that the essence of that? Like, do you want
they come
both?
They come hand in hand. Yeah, you want both. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was, I had a whole bullet just for that paradoxical intention of the paradox of you're trying to do something with the goal in mind, but that pushes you farther away.
Yeah.
I've had this before. I sweat a lot. I don't know why you don't sweat, but especially when I think I'm sweating, I'll sweat a lot more, and it just gets dangerous. Same with public speaking. You get nervous. That makes you more nervous. It's just a negative feedback loop. They have it in all aspects of life.
have that with different aspects. Especially when it came to my anxiety, I would have asthma in elementary school that would trigger my anxiety, and anxiety causes more asthma. And it's just a vicious cycle. Yeah.
It happens a lot. And that's the problem, is like when you have this singular result minded goal, it's like, I want to be happy. You're just going to get farther away from it. So just doing the little micro meaning
Yeah, micro
missions that you
meaning.
have.
If you're trekking, it's micro goals. Just get another 10 meters, another 10 meters.
A couple quick points that I'll make. One, it was interesting because they found that once the camps were liberated, a lot of people, they had this disillusionment with the world because in their heads they built it up of like the grandeur of life outside the camps. And they get back and they didn't have any family. Like no one recognized them. No one was there to greet them. And there were a lot of these issues of just depression and just like, what is life anymore? Because it just wasn't what they built it up to be. And I mean, I forget exactly how they counteracted that, but just like, having gratitude for everything. And there were people too that wanted to get retribution. One guy actually said like, hey, if there is not blood on my hand, take my hand, like cut my hand off.
Wow.
Basically. And that's one of the big takeaways I had too, was anyone can be evil, in the sense that anyone could be a Nazi. I could be a Nazi. I think anyone, like, this is referenced by, yes, the Nazis in the camp that were doing horrible things, but they actually said like Dr. J, I think he was euthanasia, big on the euthanasia program for them. And he murdered thousands of people and like would go strides to make sure everyone was killed. But then years later, they find him, I think in Argentina or something like that. And he was one of the greatest people there. He totally changed who he was as a person. So people are.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're right. Anyone can be evil. And I think what we forget too is anyone can be good. And there's this great quote, I forget who said it, some philosopher: treat a man as he is, and he will become what he is. Treat a man as he can be, and he will become what he can be. I heard Michael Lewis say that, but basically, like, it kind of goes back to this labeling thing. Call someone something or say they are something a million times over, you better believe they're going to become that.
Did you ever see that teacher that did like the kindergarten experiment with racism and the students?
Yes.
Where she was like, everyone with blue eyes.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if they were inferior, whatever, it doesn't matter.
No, yeah.
Blue eyes are inferior, just, arbitrary determinations of who's better and who isn't. And immediately the people that were better, so the brown eyes, were just treating the blue eyes terribly. And it's just
within a matter of days,
silly.
Or the
same day. You see the same thing happen, and I say the Nazis, but I'm saying that mostly because the capos, in this case, were Jews that were just put on this elevated standing of they oversee. So they had a little bit of power, and they abused that power to their own people, or their own people, if you call it that. So no one is immune to this. I think anyone in those circumstances is susceptible. And so thinking that you can't be twisted, you're just not being honest with yourself and human nature. A lot of stuff. I don't want to.
That's where we got to leave it.
I don't want to end on that. Okay, end on a better note than that. I forgot to mention before. Like,
I have one more good quote if you want it.
Okay, let me mention this, and then you can good quote cap it. Before I mentioned, I forget what episode, 1 or 2 ago, we were talking about money and not being the root of happiness. And what it really comes down to, it covers your basic needs, so you're not starving or going through all these difficult living situations. But beyond that, it comes down to your relationships, your deep relationships. So I think that connects with love and humor, and then meaning. And that's what I missed before. I couldn't think of meaning for some reason. It's that purpose that you have in life. And, Frankl is focused on both. I mean, he gets to the essence of both of them here. So at the end of the day, I guess make enough money so that you can cover the basic stuff, so you're not struggling like you're living in these concentration camps. And then beyond that, just focus on love, focus on finding meaning with what you do every single day.
Yeah, that's a great place to end. I don't want to give out my quote. It's too good.
Yeah.
That's too good. You can have the last word.
Tomorrow.
Humbling. That is just very humbling. And I didn't even read the book again. So thank you for giving me that history.
Little spark notes. I want to read I've heard this recommended a lot, and it has phenomenal reviews. on Amazon, The Gulag Archipelago. I'm not sure exactly what it gets into, but the gulags in Russia, kind of similar scenario where those were run by fellow prison mates. So it's interesting to see how they turn on their own people in that sense. I think that's a long one, but that's a good one I want to get to at some point. But tomorrow we have celebration.
Oh my word.
We're going to break down everything 50. We've learned episode 1 through 49. I guess getting to 50. Should we wait till after 50? No. 50. We break down everything we learned to that point. I'm excited for it. We'll get into some guests and another book on body language later in the week.
Yes.
But I love
which I'm tearing through. It's freaking me out.
Isn't it good?
I'm like, oh, I do that. I pacify. I do all these things.
You do this a lot.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
I can't. It's like once you have this mental framework, you just see it all the time.
Okay, but really quick, here's the problem. I was going to say, because I'm reading about it now, I cross my arms a lot for comfort. I don't think I do it out of defense, but I don't know. That's my limbic brain, right?
We'll get into it.
Okay.
I'm excited to break that down.
Okay.
It's so important. All right, Belky, closing thoughts. Anything, basically read the book if you want to find meaning. Oh, this is what I want to say.
Yes.
Why it's so important now. Because everyone's, relatively speaking, at home. You have all this free time, and boredom is one of the most dangerous things. It's unclear when the pandemic's going to end. And that's kind of basically the same situation. Like, you don't know when you're going to be liberated from the camps. So I think it's important to really focus on meeting now more than ever to combat any sort of depression that might creep in. So just like, we have our podcast to go against that. We have Dunbar coming up. I'm going to Chicago. But find that for yourself.
One day at a time.
Read the book. Take it one day at a time. All right, Belky, This was episode 49.
Yes.
Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Good talking to you. We'll talk tomorrow.
All right.
Peace.
Later.